This story is titled, Parents Refused to Pay for My College for Independence, but Covered My Sister's Expenses. Now they want me back after family drama. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey Reddit, I'm Ellie, 21 female, and I've got some family drama to unload. For context, I recently graduated college now, but my journey wasn't quite easy. It all started when I was 18, and my parents pulled a stunt. Let me break it down for you. So, it was the summer after high school. I was excited about starting community college in the fall. I picked a school close to home because, let's be real, college is expensive, and commuting seemed like the smart choice. Plus, I had some savings from my part-time cafe job, and I was also relying on my parents' support to get through this, so I thought I'd be okay. One evening, my mom and dad sat me down at the kitchen table. I figured it was going to be one of those typical, "we're so proud of you" chats, but nope. Instead, I got the "you're an adult now" speech. You know the one. It's time to be independent. You need to learn the value of money, blah, blah, blah. Then my mom hits me with, "We've decided we won't be paying for your college. You'll need to figure it out on your own." And just like that, my stomach dropped. It wasn't like I expected them to pay for everything, but not a single dime. No help with tuition, books, or even gas for commuting. That felt like a slap in the face. But wait, it gets better. My dad, who's usually the quiet one, goes, "If you want to live here, you'll need to start paying rent and your own groceries. It's only fair." I just sat there like, what the hell? I mean, I was still in my childhood bedroom, sleeping under posters from middle school. And now they wanted rent from me? On top of everything else? To give you some background, my parents aren't strapped for cash. My mom's an accountant and my dad's a project manager. They're doing fine. They weren't making me pay rent because they needed the money. They were doing it to teach me responsibility. Meanwhile, my younger sister Kylie, 16 female at that time, was out there living like a princess. Kylie has always been the golden child. Straight A's, captain of the cheer squad, everyone's favorite. My parents practically worship her. I'd like to say I stood up to my parents right then and there, but honestly, I didn't. I didn't want to cause drama or seem ungrateful. I figured, fine, I'll pay rent and hustle my way through college. I've always been independent anyway. But deep down, I was angry. Rent wasn't the only thing I had to worry about. Tuition, books, gas, groceries. It all added up. I started picking up extra shifts at the cafe, sometimes working late into the night. On top of that, I took on small baking gigs, making cupcakes and cookies for events. It felt like I was constantly working, but no matter how much I made, it was never enough. But I kept going so I'd be ready when school started. Moving out crossed my mind more times than I can count. I even started looking at apartments near campus, but rent in my area is insane. Like, how do people afford this insane? Every place I looked at was way out of my budget, even if I got roommates. I realized pretty quickly that moving out wasn't an option. Not yet, anyway. So, I made a deal with myself. I'd stick it out at home until I graduated. I'd keep my head down, save as much as I could, and the second I had enough money, I'd cut them off completely. That became my motivation. Every late-night shift, every dollar saved, every skipped outing with friends, it was all part of my plan to get out and never look back. But sticking around wasn't easy. Mom and Dad didn't make it any better. They started asking for rent before I actually started my classes. They'd constantly remind me about my rent due date, even if I was just a day or two away from paying. It wasn't like I was late or anything. They just liked to hang it over my head. Meanwhile, they were showering Kylie with gifts like it was Christmas every week. One time, they took her shopping for a new cheer uniform and ended up buying her an entire wardrobe. She came home with bags of clothes, shoes, and accessories, grinning from ear to ear. I asked Mom if they could at least help me with my textbooks for the semester, as it was starting very soon. She just looked at me and said, "Ellie, you need to learn to budget better. Kylie doesn't have these kinds of expenses." That stung. It wasn't just about the money. It was about how little they seemed to care about what I was going through. Kylie didn't make things any easier. She's not a bad person, but she's definitely spoiled. She'd brag about her new stuff or complain about how hard cheer practice was while I was running on 3 hours of sleep and trying to juggle work and save up for school. One night, I came home after a double shift, completely exhausted, and found her lounging on the couch with her new AirPods. "Oh, Mom and Dad got these for me," she said casually, like it was no big deal. You should get some too. They're amazing. I just looked at her and said, yeah, maybe when I don't have to pay rent. She rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling through TikTok. There were moments when I wanted to scream, to tell my parents how unfair it all was. But I knew it wouldn't make a difference. They had their golden child, and I was just the one paying rent. So I kept my mouth shut and focused on my plan to get out. College was supposed to be this exciting new chapter in my life, but honestly, it just felt like survival mode from the jump. I thought I'd have time to find my footing, figure out a rhythm, and maybe even enjoy myself a little, but nope. Between school, work, and my parents constantly breathing down my neck about rent, I was running on empty pretty much 24/7. I was up at 6 a.m. every day, out the door by 7, and at my community college for morning classes. I'd try to get some studying in between lectures, but by the time noon rolled around, I'd be rushing to my shift at the cafe. Most days, I'd work until 9 or 10 p.m., go home, and collapse into bed. And on weekends? Forget relaxing. That's when I'd be baking for small catering orders because, surprise, working part-time wasn't cutting it. I'd like to say I was handling it all like a pro, but that would be a lie. The cafe was chaos most of the time. We were always short-staffed, and the pandemic had made people extra impatient, so every shift felt like a marathon. I'd be behind the counter making lattes, then running to the drive-thru, then dealing with Karen number 87 who thought her coffee wasn't hot enough, all while knowing that I still had a pile of assignments waiting for me at home. To make it worse, my parents were absolutely no help. They saw me dragging myself home late at night, but instead of offering support, they'd hit me with, "Don't forget your rent's due Friday," or "We noticed the electricity bill went up. Are you leaving your light on?" I wanted to scream every time. And of course, while I was killing myself to make ends meet, Kylie had zero responsibilities, no job, and all the time in the world for cheer practice, hanging out with her friends, or scrolling TikTok for hours. I'd come home and find her sitting on the couch with her favorite snacks, watching whatever new Netflix show she was obsessed with, while mom made her a smoothie to keep her energy up. It was like living in two different worlds under the same roof. The financial stress was unreal. Rent wasn't outrageous compared to what I'd pay if I moved out, but it still felt like a slap in the face to be paying for the privilege of living in my own house. Add other costs into the mix, and I was constantly broke. There were weeks when I'd open my bank app and just stare at the balance, wondering how I was going to stretch $42 until my next paycheck. And asking for help? Forget it. One time, I tried asking mom if she could cover groceries for a week because I'd had to buy a $200 textbook for class. She gave me this look like I'd just asked her to refinance the house and said, "Ellie, we're already doing so much for you by letting you stay here. Letting me stay here." Like I wasn't paying rent. Like I wasn't already contributing more than Kylie, who still got her allowance every month without being asked for any contribution, not a penny. Things really hit a low point during midterms. I was drowning in assignments, barely getting any sleep, and my hours at the cafe had been cut because business was slow. I was trying to make up for the lost income with extra baking gigs, but there were only so many hours in a day. One weekend, I got a huge order for a birthday party, 100 cupcakes and a custom cake. It was great money, but it also meant pulling an all-nighter to get everything done. I spent hours baking, frosting, and decorating, finishing just in time to deliver the order and head straight to class. By the time I got home that afternoon, I was completely dead on my feet. I walked into the kitchen and found Mom and Kylie baking cookies together. For fun. Kylie looked up and said, "Oh, hey, Ellie. You should join us. It's so relaxing." I wanted to throw the entire tray of cookies out the window. Instead, I muttered something about being tired and went to my room. I didn't wake up until the next morning. By the end of the semester, I was completely burnt out. My grades weren't terrible, but they weren't great either. I was barely keeping my head above water, and every time I thought about how hard I was working just to scrape by, I felt this deep, simmering anger. It wasn't fair. I was doing everything I could to stand on my own 2 feet like they wanted, and they couldn't even acknowledge it. Meanwhile, Kylie was getting everything handed to her on a silver platter. I don't know how I made it through that first year. It felt like I was constantly running uphill with a backpack full of bricks. But I kept reminding myself that it wouldn't be forever. I just had to survive a little longer. What I didn't realize was that things weren't just unfair. They were straight up rigged against me. And when I finally found out the truth, it hit me like a truck. By the time Kylie hit her senior year of high school, it felt like my parents were running a full-blown campaign to crown her the family's golden child of the century. Don't get me wrong, I'd always known they favored her. But this was next-level stuff. My parents were treating Kylie's college plans like some kind of life-or-death mission. They were taking her on campus tours months in advance, turning them into mini family vacations. Every time they came back, Kylie had a fresh haul of university merch. Hoodies, water bottles, planners, like she'd already won the lottery. Meanwhile, I was just trying to survive. My budget was so tight that I was constantly behind on something. Tuition payments, books, car maintenance, you name it. I couldn't afford to take as many classes as I wanted, so my graduation timeline started to stretch out longer and longer. At this rate, I'd be lucky to graduate before Kylie. One night, Mom came into the kitchen while I was trying to study. I was already on edge because I'd just realized I'd forgotten to turn in an online assignment, again. Without even a, "How's it going?" She dropped it. "We're thinking of getting Kylie a car for college." I stared at her, trying to process. "What? She's going to need something reliable," Mom said, as if it was the most logical thing in the world. "You know how hard it is to get around without a car." I almost laughed. "You wouldn't even help me with a bus pass when I started college, and now you're buying Kylie a car?" Mom gave me that look. You know the one. The don't be dramatic look. "Ellie, you've always been more independent. Kylie needs more support to succeed." I didn't say anything. I just went back to my notes, pretending I wasn't boiling inside. But here's the thing. It wasn't just the car. That was just the cherry on top. My parents had made it clear they were going all in on Kylie's college experience. Tuition, covered, rent, paid, monthly allowance, of course. The same parents who told me I needed to learn the value of money were basically handing Kylie a blank check. It was like watching someone live out the dream you never got to have. The favoritism didn't stop there. Mom started spending hours researching dorm decor with Kylie, buying her bedding sets and matching storage bins. Dad was suddenly a tech expert, helping her pick out the perfect laptop. They even sat down to make a college prep budget, which honestly just looked like a shopping list for a spoiled teenager. I'll never forget the night they were all in the living room, huddled around the coffee table with campus brochures and spreadsheets. Kylie was showing off some Pinterest board of dorm ideas, while Dad was writing things down like he was planning a corporate merger. "What's going on?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "We're helping Kylie decide between schools," Mom said, barely glancing up. "It's such a big decision. We want to make sure she's prepared." Prepared. Right. When she started getting acceptance letters, it was like my parents had won the lottery. She got into her top choice school, and they threw her a celebratory dinner, complete with her favorite meal and a cake that said, "Congrats, Kylie," in pink frosting. I didn't even get a good job when I got into community college. During the dinner, Mom kept going on about how proud she was and how Kylie has worked so hard for this. At one point, she turned to me and said, "Ellie, you must be so proud of your sister. She's really going places." I wanted to scream. Worked hard? Kylie barely knew what hard work was. She'd been coasting through life on talent and parental favoritism, while I was out here drowning in student loans and caffeine. After that, I started avoiding family dinners altogether. It was easier to focus on my own life than to watch them build Kylie's pedestal higher and higher. The final straw came a couple of weeks before Kylie's move-in day. I came home from work one night to find a shiny used SUV parked in the driveway. At first, I thought maybe one of their friends had stopped by, but then Kylie came running outside, squealing. "They got me a car," she shouted, practically bouncing up and down. I just stood there, staring at it. Later that night, I overheard Mom and Dad talking about Kylie's monthly allowance. Apparently, they were planning to give her enough to cover groceries, gas, and a little extra for fun. Meanwhile, I was eating ramen and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because I couldn't afford anything else. I thought about saying something, about calling them out for how unfair it all was. But what was the point? They'd just tell me the same thing they always did. Kylie needs more support. Or, it's not about favoritism. So, I kept my mouth shut. Kylie, of course, was completely oblivious. She'd pop into my room every now and then to show me pictures of her dorm setup, or talk about how excited she was to start her college journey. One time, she actually said, "Ellie, you're so lucky you got to figure out independence early. I don't know if I could handle everything you do." Lucky. She thought I was lucky. I wanted to laugh in her face, but instead I just said, "Yeah, it's been great," and went back to my homework. The favoritism wasn't bearable anymore. It was so in your face that I started questioning whether my parents even saw me as their kid or just some tenant who happened to share their DNA. I didn't talk to anyone about how I was feeling for the longest time. What was the point? My friends were supportive, but they didn't really get it, and bringing it up at home was like shouting into the void. But one night, I found myself calling Grandpa Hank. Growing up, I spent hours in his bakery, learning how to measure flour properly, crack eggs without getting shells everywhere, and make the perfect frosting swirls on cupcakes. It was his way of showing me that hard work could also be something you love. He never judged me, never pressured me to be perfect. He just let me be me. I hadn't talked to Grandpa Hank in a while. He and Grandma had been living their best lives ever since he retired a few years ago. The man spent his whole life building up his bakery business from scratch, and when he finally decided to step away, he left it in the hands of one of his longtime managers so he and Grandma could travel the world. They'd always dreamed about doing it, and once he hung up his apron, they went for it. The downside was that Grandpa wasn't exactly tech savvy. He barely knew how to use his phone, let alone keep up with social media, so staying in touch wasn't easy. He'd send the occasional postcard or call once in a blue moon, but most of the time, I just heard about their adventures secondhand through my parents. They'd only been back for a little while when I called him that night. I guess they'd decided to slow down and spend more time at home. I hadn't reached out earlier because, honestly, I didn't want to dump my problems on him. He was retired, happy, and finally getting to enjoy his life. The last thing I wanted was to ruin that by unloading all my drama. But that night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. When he picked up the phone, I could feel my shoulders relax a little. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "What's going on?" I didn't hold back. I told him everything. How I was drowning in bills, how my parents were pouring all their time and money into Kylie's college plans while making me pay rent. I ranted about the car they'd bought her, the allowance they were planning to give her, and how I was left struggling just to keep up with school. Grandpa listened quietly, letting me get it all out. I could hear him making little noises of acknowledgement every now and then, like he was piecing something together in his head. Then, out of nowhere, he interrupted me. "Ellie," he said slowly, "didn't your parents use the money I gave them for your education?" I blinked. "What money?" There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. It wasn't angry, not yet, but there was something sharp about it, like he was trying to stay calm. "When you were 16, your grandmother and I put aside $50,000 for your college fund. We gave it to your parents because they said they'd use it to pay for your tuition and expenses. Are you telling me they never mentioned it to you?" I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "They never said anything," I said, my voice shaky. "I've been paying for everything myself, all of it." Grandpa let out a heavy sigh, the kind that felt like it carried years of disappointment. "Ellie, that money was for you. We gave it to them because we wanted to make sure you had a solid start, so you wouldn't have to struggle. If I'd known this is what they were doing..." He trailed off, but I could hear the anger creeping into his tone. It took me a minute to process what he was saying. All this time, I'd been told that my parents couldn't afford to help me and wanted me to learn independence the hard way. But now I was finding out they'd had $50,000 specifically meant for me, and they hadn't even bothered to tell me about it. "They lied to me, Ellie," Grandpa said finally. "And they lied to you. That money was yours. Not theirs. Not Kylie's. Yours." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to cry, but mostly I just felt numb. The past few years of scraping by, working myself to the bone, and falling behind in school all suddenly felt so much heavier. "What do you think they did with it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Grandpa said, and for the first time I could hear real anger in his voice. "But I'm going to find out." There was a long pause, and then he added, "Ellie, you're not alone in this. I'll handle it. You just focus on school, okay?" Hearing him say that made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. For years, I'd been carrying everything on my own, thinking no one cared or even noticed. But now, for the first time, I felt like someone was in my corner. "Thanks, Grandpa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Anytime, kiddo," he said. "And Ellie, don't let this crush you. You're stronger than they give you credit for." After we hung up, the anger was starting to creep in, replacing the numbness. How could my parents do this to me? How could they take something that was meant to make my life easier and keep it from me, knowing full well how much I was struggling? It wasn't just about the money. It was the fact that they'd chosen to let me suffer while putting Kylie on a pedestal. They'd lied to Grandpa, stolen from me, and then had the audacity to act like I should be grateful for the scraps they gave me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept going back to all the times I'd asked for help. Just a little, just enough to get by, and they'd brushed me off. The times Mom told me I needed to budget better while they were out buying Kylie a new phone or booking her another campus visit. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made, working late nights, skipping meals, delaying graduation, because I didn't think there was any other option. And the whole time, they had $50,000 sitting in their pocket that could have changed everything. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. But there was also a part of me that felt something else. Hope. Grandpa wasn't the kind of person to make empty promises. If he said he was going to handle it, I believed him. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't completely alone in this mess. That thought didn't erase the hurt, but it gave me something to hold on to. A few days after my first conversation with Grandpa Hank, my phone lit up with his name. "I talked to your parents," he said, not even bothering with a hello. "Ellie, you're not going to believe the excuses they gave me." I braced myself. "What did they say?" "They told me they used the $50,000 your grandmother and I gave them for family expenses," he said, his voice sharp. When I pressed them on what exactly that meant, your mother admitted they'd been saving it for Kylie's college instead. I felt my stomach drop. $50,000. That was more than enough to cover my tuition, rent, and every expense I'd been killing myself to pay off for years. And they'd taken it, all of it, to make sure Kylie had a perfect, stress-free college experience. They had no right, Grandpa continued, practically seething. That money was for you. I made it clear that they need to repay it, every last cent. And if they don't, they're out of the will. I can't stay here anymore, Grandpa, I said suddenly. I can't look at them, knowing what they did. Then don't, he said immediately. There's a guest room here with your name on it. Pack your things and come over tonight. Moving out of my parents' house was the easiest decision I'd ever made. I didn't even bother telling them I was leaving. I just started packing my bags as soon as I hung up with Grandpa. Kylie walked past my room at one point, raising an eyebrow when she saw the mess. "What's going on?" she asked, completely oblivious to everything that had been happening. "I'm moving out," I said shortly, throwing another pile of clothes into a suitcase. She blinked. "Wait, what? Why?" "Ask Mom and Dad," I said, zipping up the suitcase. I didn't owe her an explanation. I didn't see my parents that night. They were both out. I left a short note on the kitchen counter that just said, "I'm moving in with Grandpa. Don't call me." And then I was gone. When I got to Grandpa's house, he was waiting for me at the door. "Come on in, kiddo," he said, pulling me into a hug. "This is where you belong." The guest room was cozy, with a big bed and a window that overlooked Grandpa's garden. It already felt more like home than my parents' house ever had. That night, for the first time in years, I went to bed without feeling like the weight of the world was crushing me. But of course, the peace didn't last long. The next morning, the calls started. Mom was the first. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail that was so dramatic it almost made me laugh. "Ellie, how could you just leave like this? Do you have any idea how this makes us look? You're overreacting. Come home so we can talk this out." "Yeah, no thanks." Then Dad called. He was a little less theatrical, but still just as frustrating. "Ellie, we know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle things. We're family. We can work through this together." Sure, now they wanted to work through things. Where was that energy when I was drowning in bills and begging for help? By the end of the day, I'd ignored a dozen calls and texts from both of them. The messages were a mix of emotions. One minute they were apologizing. The next they were blaming me for turning Grandpa against them. One text from Mom stood out. "Ellie, you don't understand how hard this has been for us. We were just trying to do what was best for everyone. Can't you see that?" I stared at it for a long time, before finally replying, "No, Mom. You weren't trying to do what was best for everyone. You were doing what was best for Kylie, and you didn't care who you hurt in the process." Her response came almost immediately. "That's not fair. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you could handle it because you've always been so strong." There it was again. That same tired excuse. I didn't even bother replying. The next day, they started showing up at Grandpa's house. I was sitting at the kitchen table, helping him sort through some bakery paperwork, when I saw Mom's car pull into the driveway. I groaned. "They're here." Grandpa didn't look surprised. "Let me handle this," he said, standing up and heading to the door. I stayed in the kitchen, but I could hear everything. Mom was already in full meltdown mode when Grandpa opened the door. "Hank, we need to talk to Ellie," she said. "She's being completely unreasonable about this whole situation." Grandpa didn't let her in. "You mean the situation where you stole $50,000 from her? I think she's being perfectly reasonable." Mom sputtered, trying to defend herself. "We didn't steal it. It was for the family. We thought—" "You thought wrong," Grandpa interrupted. "That money was for Ellie, and you knew it. You made her struggle while you pampered Kylie. You don't get to waltz in here and act like the victim." I wanted to cheer. Mom tried again. "But Hank, we were just trying to—" Grandpa cut her off. "If you're not here to apologize, you can leave. Ellie deserves better than this, and I'm not going to stand by while you try to guilt her into forgiving you." There was a long silence, and then I heard the sound of Mom's car door slamming. She didn't even make it into the house. Once Grandpa demanded they repay the $50,000 they'd stolen from me, Mom and Dad's entire operation fell apart. They'd been coasting along like nothing was wrong, but Grandpa wasn't playing around. He gave them a deadline, and when they realized he wasn't bluffing, the panic must have set in. He made it clear they needed to pay back every single cent, or they'd lose their place in the will. The fallout hit Kylie almost immediately. Mom and Dad had been cushioning Kylie's transition to college as much as humanly possible. She was living in a dorm, like every other freshman, but they'd gone above and beyond to make it feel like home. Kylie had everything: a mini fridge, a high-end coffee maker, matching decor, and even some pricey electronics to help her focus. She never had to think about budgeting or work. Her only responsibility was to enjoy the college experience. Well, not anymore. With $50,000 to repay, Mom and Dad had to tighten the purse strings. Kylie's weekly care packages? Gone. The spending money they were planning to send her? Canceled. Even some of the fancy extras in her dorm had to be returned. Suddenly, Kylie wasn't just another spoiled golden child. She was a college student like the rest of us. The best part? She had to get a part-time job. I found out through Instagram, of course. Kylie posted a selfie in the mirror of some boutique with a caption that read, "First day, working girl, law, new adventures." I couldn't help but laugh. She made it sound like it was some cute little hobby, but I knew her well enough to know she was miserable. It didn't take long for Kylie to crack. One night she called me sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Ellie," she wailed, "everything's ruined." I took a deep breath. "What's ruined, Kylie?" "My life," she cried. "Mom and Dad aren't sending me any more money. They said they can't afford it, and now I have to work and budget and—" She broke off into another round of sobbing. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Kylie, welcome to the real world. You're finally experiencing what the rest of us deal with every day." She didn't appreciate that. "This is all your fault," she snapped, her voice sharp with anger. "If you hadn't told Grandpa, none of this would have happened." That made me laugh. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I ruin your little bubble of privilege? Because as far as I'm concerned, you're just catching up to what I've been dealing with for years." Kylie started to say something else, but I wasn't in the mood to argue. "Look," I said, cutting her off. "If you want someone to blame, talk to Mom and Dad. They're the ones who stole from me to fund your perfect little life." She hung up on me after that, which honestly saved me the trouble. The weeks that followed were almost entertaining. Kylie started posting cryptic updates on social media about how hard life was, and how she felt betrayed by the people she trusted most. It was laughable, considering she'd spent her entire life being pampered and shielded from reality. Now that she had to face even a fraction of the challenges I'd been dealing with, she acted like the world was ending. One post stood out to me: a picture of her dorm desk with a cup of instant noodles and a caption that read, "College life. It's not as glamorous as it seems." I stared at it for a while, debating whether to comment. I wanted to say something like, "You've been living this way for 2 weeks. Try doing it for years." But I stopped myself. What was the point? Kylie would never understand. Still, her pity party didn't go unnoticed. Her friends and followers flooded her comments with messages of support, saying things like, "Stay strong, Kylie, and you've got this," as if getting a part-time job and budgeting was some insurmountable challenge. From what I heard through the family grapevine, Kylie wasn't adjusting well to her new reality. She complained to anyone who would listen about how unfair it all was, but the sympathy wasn't as strong as she probably hoped. Most people were too busy with their own problems to care about hers. Mom and Dad tried to soften the blow, of course. They sent her a couple of care packages, nowhere near as extravagant as before, but still enough to remind Kylie that she was the favorite. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. For years, they'd told me that struggling was good for me, that it would make me stronger. Now that Kylie was struggling, they were bending over backward to make sure she didn't fall apart completely. But even with their help, Kylie wasn't thriving. She was surviving, sure, but that was it. Her grades started slipping. She had trouble keeping up with her job, and the cracks in her perfect facade were starting to show. And honestly, I didn't feel bad for her. Meanwhile, Grandpa didn't just give me a place to stay. He made sure I had everything I needed to get back on track. He helped me organize my finances, encouraged me to take on a full course load to finish college sooner, and even got me involved in his bakery's operations. It felt good to be around someone who actually cared about my future. As for my parents, they kept trying to reach out. At first, it was constant. Mom left voicemail after voicemail, her tone switching between guilt trips and apologies. "Ellie, we're sorry, okay?" We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. We love you. Sure, they loved me. Just not enough to treat me fairly when it mattered. Dad's messages were more subdued, but just as frustrating. Ellie, we know you're upset, but you've got to see it from our side. We were trying to do what was best for the family. And now this family needs you. Please come home. I didn't respond to any of them. What was there to say? They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry they'd been caught, and they only wanted me back to exploit me one more time. Eventually, the calls slowed down. I think they realized I wasn't going to forgive them, just because they wanted me to. Shortly before I officially graduated, Grandpa sat me down in the kitchen. Ellie, he said, sliding a folder across the table. I've been thinking about the future of the bakery. I opened the folder and found a stack of papers detailing the business's operations. Grandpa smiled at me, his eyes crinkling the way they always did when he was proud. You've been helping out a lot, and I can see how much you care about this place. I want you to take over when you're ready. I stared at him, completely stunned. Grandpa, are you serious? Of course I'm serious, he said. You've earned this, Ellie, and I know you'll make it even better. Hearing that from him meant everything. For so long, I'd felt like my hard work didn't matter, like no one saw how much I was struggling. But Grandpa did. He always had. Taking over the bakery became my focus after that. I threw myself into learning everything I could about the business, from managing staff to balancing budgets. Grandpa was right there with me, guiding me through every step. By the time I graduated, I was ready to take the reins. Grandpa officially handed over the business, and we celebrated with a big party at the bakery. Friends, staff, and even some of my professors showed up to congratulate me. These days, I don't talk to my parents much. They're still trying to patch things up, acting like a few apologies will magically fix everything. What they don't realize is that Grandpa already removed them from the will months ago. They're probably still clinging to the hope that they can weasel their way back in, but honestly, it's not my problem. I'm too busy running the bakery and building something real for myself. If they want to waste their time, that's on them. Let them watch from the sidelines. I'm moving forward, and I'm not looking back. This story is titled, My Wife Left Me 2 weeks after our wedding, because her ex got terminal cancer and she wanted to fulfill her dying wish to marry her. Now, 3 years later, he's completely fine and living his best. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Throwaway, because some people know my main account. Never thought I'd be one of those guys posting their relationship drama on Reddit, but here I am. It's been a wild ride and I need to get this shit off my chest. Maybe writing it all down will help me process this clusterfuck of a situation. Fair warning, this is going to be a long post. So a bit of background, me, 30 male, and Emma, 28 female, had what I thought was a rock-solid relationship for 5 years before we got married. We met at my buddy Phil's BBQ back in 2018. I wasn't even going to go TBH, had a rough week at work and just wanted to chill at home. But Phil kept bugging me saying I needed to get out more. He'd been trying to set me up with random girls since my last relationship ended badly. The moment I saw Emma, something just clicked. She was helping Phil's girlfriend set up the food table, laughing at something. She had on this casual blue sundress and just looked so natural, not like the typical Instagram perfect girls Phil usually tried to set me up with. We got talking about how we both hate BBQ chicken. Yeah, weird convo starter at a BBQ lol, and ended up talking for like 3 hours straight. Just one of those convos that flows effortlessly. You know, after that, we were pretty much inseparable. Started dating officially like 2 weeks later. She was everything I wanted in a partner. Smart. She's a pediatric nurse. Funny. Has this adorably weird sense of humor. Beautiful, but like naturally beautiful, not high maintenance. And we just clicked on every level. We had the same values, wanted the same things in life, even had the same stupid taste in reality TV shows. 90 Day Fiancé is our guilty pleasure LMAO. We never had those dramatic relationship problems you see on here all the time. No trust issues, no fights about dumb stuff. None of that BS. Sure, we had disagreements, but we always worked them out like adults. My buddies used to give me shit for being whipped. But honestly, I was just happy. Emma made me want to be a better person, as cheesy as that sounds. Fast forward to last year. I proposed during a hiking trip. She loves outdoor stuff. Almost fucked it up because I was so nervous I almost dropped the ring off the mountain lol. But she said yes, crying and laughing at the same time. We started planning the wedding right away. Emma had always dreamed of getting married at this historic vineyard, about an hour outside the city. Shit was expensive but seeing how happy it made her was worth every penny. The wedding was, man, it was perfect. And I'm not just saying that because I spent a small fortune on it. Seriously, why TF are weddings so expensive? The vineyard looked amazing, all decorated with lights and flowers. Emma looked absolutely stunning in her dress. I remember looking at Emma that night, watching her laugh with her bridesmaids, and thinking how fucking lucky I was. Like, this amazing woman actually chose to spend her life with me? It felt unreal. We had all these plans. Wanted to travel more, maybe buy a house in the suburbs next year, start trying for kids in a couple years. Emma even had names picked out already. She wanted to name our future son after her grandfather, which I was cool with. If someone had told me then what was about to happen, I would have laughed in their face. How could anything go wrong? We were solid. Or at least, I thought we were. So 2 months after we got back from our honeymoon in Greece, which was fucking amazing, BTW. If you ever get the chance to visit Santorini, do it. Everything went to complete shit. It was a Friday night and I was at home grilling these fancy aged ribeyes I'd gotten from this bougie butcher shop downtown. Like $60 per steak expensive. Emma loves a good steak dinner, and I wanted to surprise her because she'd been working crazy shifts at the hospital lately. Emma was supposed to be home by 6, but she texted saying she was meeting her best friend Ashley for a quick coffee after work. Ashley's always been, well, let's just say she's not my favorite person. She's one of those people who's constantly stirring up drama and then acts innocent about it. But she was Emma's best friend since college, so I tried to be cool about it. By 8:30, the steaks were getting cold, and Emma still wasn't home. I was getting kind of annoyed and hungry AF, but figured they must have gotten caught up talking. Emma finally got home around 9, and the second she walked in, I knew something was wrong. She had this weird look on her face, kind of like when she has to tell parents bad news at the hospital. Didn't even notice the fancy dinner setup I'd made. She just said, "We need to talk," in this serious voice I'd never heard her use before. Not gonna lie, my first thought was, she was pregnant. We'd talked about waiting a couple years, but accidents happen, right? Honestly, I wish it had been that. What she told me next made me wish we were just having an unexpected baby. She sat down at our kitchen island and started telling me about her ex-boyfriend Mark. Now I knew about Mark. They'd dated for 3 years in college. Seemed pretty serious. Emma didn't talk about him much, but I knew they'd ended things because he took a job across the country and neither wanted to do long distance. Turns out Ashley, Emma's friend, had run into Mark's brother at the gym earlier that week. Mark had stage 4 glioblastoma, basically this super aggressive brain cancer. Doctors gave him maybe 6 months tops. Emma found out through Ashley and had apparently been texting with Mark since then. She showed me their messages, which BTW who TF keeps texting their ex when their spouse is at home making them dinner. There were dozens of them, going back and forth about his diagnosis, his treatment options, memories from their time together. While I was out dropping $120 on fancy steaks, my wife was having deep conversations with her dying ex. The texts weren't even, like, inappropriate or anything. Almost wish they had been. Would have made what happened next easier to deal with. They were just emotional. Lots of, "I never forgot about you," and "you were such an important part of my life" type stuff. The kind of conversations you probably shouldn't be having with an ex when you're married. Then Emma said that Mark's dying wish was to spend his last months with her. Apparently facing death made him realize she was the one that got away, or some Hallmark movie bullshit like that. And Emma, fuck, this still hurts to type. Emma told me she felt like she had to do this. Like it was some kind of test from the universe or something. The worst part? Ashley had been encouraging this whole thing. She told Emma it was fate that she found out about Mark's cancer. That Emma would regret it forever if she didn't go to him in his time of need. That sometimes life gives us second chances for a reason. Yeah, real fucking helpful, Ashley. Great advice for a newlywed. I just sat there in shock, staring at our fancy dinner getting cold, while my wife of 3 months told me about how she needed to go be with her dying ex. The same wife who'd been planning our future together just weeks ago, who still had a fucking suitcase in our bedroom that wasn't fully unpacked from our honeymoon. The thing that really got me was how Emma was talking about it. Like it was some kind of noble sacrifice she had to make. Mark has no one else, she kept saying. His family is all on the East Coast. Convenient, right? He's all alone facing death. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking, what about me? What about your husband, who you literally just promised to spend your life with? I asked her straight up if she still had feelings for Mark. She started crying. Emma's one of those people who cry when they're stressed. Usually I find it endearing, but at that moment it just pissed me off more. She said it wasn't about that. And this was bigger than our relationship. That Ashley had helped her see that this was something she needed to do to be able to live with herself. Oh yeah, let's talk about Ashley for a minute. This girl has been a thorn in my side since day one. She's one of those perpetually single friends who always has to be involved in everyone else's relationship. The type who posts inspirational quotes about following your heart on Instagram, but can't keep a relationship longer than 3 months. According to Emma, Ashley was the one who really pushed her into this whole thing. After running into Mark's brother, Ashley set up a chance meeting with Mark at their usual coffee spot. She'd been feeding Emma all this spiritual mumbo-jumbo about how the universe brings people back into our lives for a reason, and sometimes first loves are meant to be last loves, and other bullshit. I tried to be rational about it. Asked Emma if she'd seen any of Mark's medical records herself, if she'd talked to his doctors, if she'd even verified the diagnosis with his family. She got defensive, said she couldn't believe I was questioning something like this, that the Mark she knew would never lie about something so serious. The Mark she knew. Those words just kept echoing in my head. You want to know the most fucked up part? She actually expected me to be understanding about this. Like I should just be cool with my wife leaving me to go play nurse for her ex-boyfriend. She even suggested we could take a break while she helped Mark through his final journey. Her exact words, I shit you not. I lost it at that point. Told her marriage doesn't have a pause button, that she couldn't just put our life on hold while she went to fulfill some dying guy's romantic fantasy. Asked her how she'd feel if I left her for an ex who was dying. She said that was different, but couldn't explain how. The conversation went in circles for hours. Emma kept talking about karma and doing the right thing. I kept trying to make her see how insane this whole situation was. At one point, she actually said, "If you really love me, you'll understand why I need to do this." Classic manipulation right there. Finally, around 2 a.m., I'd had enough. Told her she needed to make a choice right then and there. If she walked out that door to be with Mark, we were done. No breaks, no temporary separation, no coming back when she was finished playing Florence Nightingale. Done. She looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Started talking about how life isn't black and white, and sometimes we have to make hard choices. I cut her off and said, actually, this choice was pretty fucking black and white. Either she was my wife, or she wasn't. The way she looked at me then, man, I'll never forget it. This mixture of disappointment and resignation, like I was the one failing some kind of test. She said she needed time to think, grabbed her purse and left to stay at Ashley's. The sound of the door closing behind her was like a gunshot. I didn't sleep at all that night. Just sat in our kitchen, staring at those stupid expensive steaks, wondering how my life had turned into this ridiculous drama. Kept checking my phone, thinking maybe she'd come to her senses. Then things moved pretty fast. Emma stayed at Ashley's for a few days, barely responding to my texts. Meanwhile, I was going through hell. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just kept replaying everything in my head trying to figure out where I went wrong. My buddy Phil, the one who hosted the BBQ where we met, came over with pizza when I told him what was happening. He couldn't believe it either. We'd all hung out together so many times, double dated, gone on group vacations. Emma had always seemed so normal, like not the type to pull this kind of shit at all. Then about a week after she left, I got this long text from Emma saying she'd done a lot of thinking and decided she had to follow her heart. Fucking gag. She was moving in with Mark to help him through his final months. She actually wrote that she hoped I could find it in my heart to understand, and maybe we could revisit our relationship after Mark passed. Like I was just gonna sit around waiting to be her backup plan? The next day, I got an email from her lawyer. Fucking email. Not even a phone call. She wanted a divorce and was hoping we could handle this amicably. I'll never forget sitting at my desk at work, staring at that email, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Had to tell my boss I was sick and went home. Some of our friends actually took her side, said I was being heartless and unsupportive. Like what? My friend Rachel, who I thought was my friend first, actually told me I should be proud of Emma for being so selfless. Proud that my wife was leaving me for her ex? What kind of fucked up logic is that? I remember this one dinner with our couple friends. They tried to convince me to see it from Emma's perspective. Said how would I feel if I knew I could give someone comfort in their final months but chose not to? I straight up asked them if either of them would leave their spouse for a dying ex. They got real quiet after that. The worst part was everyone treating me like I was some kind of asshole for not being okay with this. Like I was the bad guy for expecting my wife to actually honor our marriage vows. Even Emma's sister Lisa, who'd always been cool with me, started posting these vague Facebook statuses about how true love means supporting each other's difficult choices, or some BS like that. When Emma's lawyer sent over the divorce papers, I got my own lawyer. A real shark of an attorney my brother recommended. I wasn't about to get screwed over twice. Emma apparently expected me to move out of our house, which I'd paid 70% of the down payment for BTW. Told her she could buy me out if she wanted to, but I wasn't going anywhere. She seemed shocked that I wasn't just rolling over and giving her what she wanted. Think she expected me to be understanding about this whole thing right up until the end. The day she came to get her stuff was brutal. Ashley came with her, of course, and kept giving me these dirty looks like I was the villain in this story. They took 3 hours packing up Emma's things. Every time they walked past me with another box, Ashley would make these little huffing noises. I just sat on the couch drinking beer and watching football, refusing to help. Emma tried to take our dog Max, a lab mix we'd adopted 2 years ago. That was the one time I really lost my cool. Told her there was no way in hell she was taking my dog to go live with her and her dying boyfriend. She started crying about how she needed emotional support during this difficult time. I just laughed and reminded her that Max was registered under my name and I'd paid all his vet bills. She left without him. The divorce itself was pretty quick since we hadn't been married long. Emma didn't fight me on anything financial. Think she felt too guilty. She even signed over her share of the house to me without argument. Her lawyer seemed surprised by that, but Emma just wanted it done fast so she could go play nursemaid to Mark. So after Emma moved out, the house felt fucking huge. Like way too empty. I threw all her stuff right in the trash. My mom wanted me to start dating again right away. She kept trying to set me up with daughters of her friends from church. Thanks, but no thanks, Mom. My buddies tried dragging me to bars, saying I needed to get back out there. But honestly, I wasn't ready. The thought of trying to explain my situation to some random woman at a bar, yeah, my wife left me for her dying ex-boyfriend 2 months after our wedding, just seemed exhausting. Instead, I threw myself into work. Started taking all the overtime I could get. My boss was actually pretty cool about everything. Let me pick up extra projects to keep my mind busy. Made some decent money too, so that was a plus. But sitting alone in that house every night was killing me. Started having trouble sleeping. Would wake up at 3 a.m. and check my phone, half expecting to see a message from Emma saying this was all some fucked up mistake. Max was a lifesaver during this time. Having him there forced me to keep some kind of routine. Had to get up to walk him. Had to come home at decent hours to feed him. He'd sit with me on the couch while I binged Netflix, probably wondering why I was watching so much Breaking Bad at 2 a.m. I started doing some home improvements too, just to keep busy. But the hardest part was dealing with social media. Emma didn't post much about her situation. Guess it's hard to make left my husband for my dying ex look good on Instagram. But mutual friends would share stuff. Pictures of her at dinner with friends, acting like everything was normal. Ashley's posts were the worst. All these cryptic quotes about following your heart, and sometimes life has other plans. Had to block both of them eventually. I lost some friends in the split too. Couples we used to hang out with started taking sides. Some people thought I was being an asshole for not supporting Emma's difficult choice. Still can't believe that bullshit. Others just felt awkward and stopped inviting me to things. That shit hurt almost as much as the divorce itself. My brother was actually the most helpful during this time. He'd come over with his kids, force me to get out of the house. Fast forward couple of months. I was actually doing pretty good. Got promoted at work, bought a new truck, always wanted a Tacoma, and was in the best shape of my life thanks to BJJ. Even started dating a little bit. Nothing serious, but at least I could get through first date small talk without having a mental breakdown talking about my ex LOL. Then, one random Tuesday afternoon, my phone starts blowing up. Like, notifications going crazy. First, I thought it was a work emergency or something. Nope. Emma's number. Hadn't heard from her in over 3 months at this point. She's calling, texting, leaving voicemails. I ignored it at first because WTF does she want after all this time? But then I get a text from Lisa, Emma's sister. Now, Lisa and I stayed kind of friendly after everything. She actually apologized to me a couple months after the divorce. Said she couldn't believe how Emma handled everything. So when she texts saying I really need to hear what Emma has to say, I figure something serious must be up. Finally answer one of Emma's calls on my lunch break. She's hysterical. Like, can barely understand what she's saying through the crying. At first I thought maybe Mark had finally died. Yeah, I'm an asshole, whatever. But nah, this is so much better. Turns out Mark never had cancer. Never had any kind of cancer. The whole thing was a fucking lie. This dude faked an entire terminal illness because he saw our wedding photos on Instagram and decided he wanted Emma back. Let that sink in for a minute. He had faked everything. The medical reports? His buddy worked at a hospital and helped him forge them. The remote work during his treatment? Just an excuse to avoid being seen around town looking perfectly healthy. The whole thing was an elaborate scam to get Emma back. You want to know how Emma found out? Mark's sister ran into her at Whole Foods, started chatting, catching up. Emma mentioned something about Mark's treatment, and the sister has no idea what she's talking about. Turns out the whole family thought Mark and Emma had just gotten back together normally. He never told any of them about faking cancer. Emma confronts Mark about it that night. This motherfucker just laughs. Says, yeah, he made it all up, but it worked, didn't it? Oh, and the best part? He's been dating his coworker Jessica for the past 6 months. Already had plans to move to California with her for a new job. He literally looked Emma in the face and said, I needed you back then, but I'm in a better place now. People change. You should move on too. Lamau. I sat there in my truck listening to all this. And you know what the craziest part was? I started laughing. Like, full-on belly laughing. The kind where you can't breathe. The whole thing was just so absurd. This guy managed to blow up a marriage with the most insane lie I've ever heard, and then just moved on. Like it was nothing. Emma kept saying how sorry she was. How she couldn't believe she fell for it. How she'd ruined everything for nothing. She was crying about how she'd thrown away our marriage for a lie. That she'd never forgive herself. That she'd been so stupid. You know what I said? Yup, that's it. Then I hung up. My phone kept blowing up for hours after that. Emma sent me this novel-length text about how this was a sign that we were meant to work things out. That maybe this was the universe's way of bringing us back together. She's still on that spiritual bullshit, I guess. I didn't respond to any of it. Just drove to the gym, did some rolling, went home and cracked open a beer with Max. Felt weirdly calm about the whole thing. The next day, shit really hit the fan. Turns out Emma went nuclear and posted the whole story on Facebook. Tagged Mark, his new girlfriend, everyone. It was like watching a train wreck in real time. The comments section was wild. Mark's girlfriend Jessica found out about everything through the Facebook post. Dumped him immediately. His company found out he'd been lying about needing medical leave and fired him. His family was horrified. This dude literally destroyed his entire life just to get back at his ex. The karma was so perfect it almost felt scripted. But after the whole Facebook nuclear explosion, Emma went into full desperation mode. Started showing up at my work with coffee. She remembered my order, cool I guess. Sending emails to my work account. Even tried to get my mom to talk to me. Mom shut that down real quick. She never forgave Emma for what she did. After like a week of this, I finally agreed to meet her. Not because I wanted to reconcile or any of that BS, but honestly just to get her to stop harassing me and my family. Told her to meet me at this coffee shop downtown. Picked it because I knew it would be busy and she couldn't make a scene. The moment she walked in, I knew this was going to be rough. She looked rough, like she hadn't slept in days. Wearing one of my old hoodies that she must have kept after moving out. TF. Started crying the second she saw me. You guys want to know the first thing she said to me? You look good. Been working out? Like? My response. Yeah. Turns out getting abandoned by your wife is great motivation for the gym. She didn't appreciate that, but whatever. Then she launched into this whole rehearsed speech about how sorry she was, how she'd never forgive herself, how leaving me was the biggest mistake of her life. Said she thinks about me every day, still keeps pictures of us on her phone, blah, blah, blah. The whole time she's talking, I'm just sitting there thinking about how I need to pick up dog food on the way home. But here's the part that really got me. She tried to spin this whole thing as proof of how loyal Mark's lie proved she could be. Said it showed she was willing to sacrifice everything for someone she cared about. I almost spit out my coffee. I asked her straight up, if she was so loyal, why didn't she show that loyalty to her husband? Why didn't she at least verify Mark's story? Check his medical records? Talk to his doctors? She got all defensive. Said she couldn't believe I was still questioning her intentions after everything. Then she said that maybe this was all meant to be. That Mark's lie was the universe's way of showing us how strong our love was. That we could start fresh now. Stronger for having gone through this test. I lost it at that point. Told her our marriage wasn't some fucking cosmic test run. That real love doesn't mean abandoning your spouse for your ex. That loyalty isn't something you only show to people who are dying. She tried to grab my hand across the table. Bold move. I pulled back and said, you know what the worst part is? If Mark had actually been dying, you'd still be with him right now. You're only here because he turned out to be a liar. I'm still your backup plan. That hit her hard. Started doing that thing where she cries but tries to hide it by looking at the ceiling. She always did that during sad movies too. Said I was being cruel. I told her cruel was leaving your husband of 3 months for your ex without even questioning his story. Then she pulled out the big guns. Started talking about how we could go to couples counseling, how she'd spend the rest of her life making it up to me, how she'd prove she could be trusted again. Said she still had her wedding ring and wore it sometimes. Weird flex, but okay. You know what I did? Laughed. Not like a mean laugh, just couldn't help it. The whole situation was so absurd. 2 years ago, this woman destroyed me, and now she's sitting here thinking couples counseling could fix it? I told her she needed individual therapy way more than couples counseling. That she needed to figure out why she was so willing to throw away a marriage for someone who turned out to be a pathological liar. That she needed to work on herself before trying to be with anyone. The conversation ended with her asking if there was any chance for us in the future. I said, Emma, the guy you married died the day you chose Mark. I'm someone else now. Then I got up and left. Got a text from her an hour later saying she'd wait for me and prove herself somehow. Left that shit on red. Went home, hugged my dog, and ordered a pizza. So it's been about 4 months since the whole Mark faking cancer shit show blew up. I was actually starting to feel good about life again. Started dating this awesome girl Amy from my gym. She teaches the morning kickboxing classes. We'd been seeing each other for a few weeks, nothing super serious yet, but definitely heading that way. She's completely different from Emma. Straightforward, no drama, doesn't believe in all that universe has a plan bullshit. Then yesterday happened. I was at home cooking dinner. Amy was coming over later, when Emma showed up at my door. Hadn't seen her since the coffee shop confrontation. She looked different. Then I realized why. She was pregnant. Like, obviously pregnant. My first thought was, oh shit, Mark knocked her up before he bailed. But nope, life isn't that simple. She was holding this envelope, hands shaking. Told me she was 14 weeks along. Did the math in my head, right before everything went to shit with Mark. Right before she left. Guys, it's mine. She had a paternity test done already, one of those early blood test things. Showed me the results right there. 99.9% probability I'm the father. She'd been trying to work up the courage to tell me for weeks. I just stood there in my kitchen, holding these test results, while my pregnant ex-wife cried in front of me and my new girlfriend was on her way over for dinner. Felt like I was having an out-of-body experience or some shit. Emma says she found out right after everything imploded with Mark. She's been going to doctor's appointments alone. Didn't tell anyone except her mom. Said she knows this complicates everything, but she thought I had the right to know. The fucked up part of me is actually excited. Like, I always wanted to be a dad. Emma and I had talked about having kids, back when we were actually married. But then I think about everything that happened, about how she left, about Amy. I haven't told Amy yet. Emma just left like an hour ago. I ended up texting Amy saying I was sick and needed to rain check dinner. Been sitting here with Max just trying to process everything. How TF do you even handle something like this? Like, obviously I'm going to be involved in my kid's life. That's not even a question. But co-parenting with someone who abandoned you for their fake dying ex? That's going to be interesting. Plus, there's Amy. How do you tell someone you just started dating that your ex-wife who left you for her dying ex is pregnant with your kid? Feels like too much to put on someone this early. Emma wants to talk about things. Says maybe this is a sign we should try again. That a baby changes everything. But does it, though? Does it change the fact that she left me for her ex without a second thought? Does it change that she only came back when she found out he was lying? My head is spinning. Max keeps bringing me his toys like he knows I'm freaking out. Good dog. I honestly don't know what to do. Part of me wants to be excited about becoming a dad. Part of me is terrified of having to deal with Emma for the next 18 plus years. And part of me feels guilty about Amy, who didn't sign up for any of this drama. So what would you guys do? Seriously, how do you co-parent with someone who broke your trust like this? How do you tell your new girlfriend that surprise? You're gonna be a dad with your ex. How do you make sure you're there for your kid without getting sucked back into Emma's drama? Edit. Yes, I'm getting a lawyer. Not making any more decisions without legal counsel. Edit 2. To everyone suggesting I get another paternity test. Yeah, no shit. Already called about that. Edit 3. Stop telling me to get back with Emma for the baby. That's not how this works. Edit 4. Jesus Christ, guys, stop DMing me your theories about Emma getting pregnant on purpose to trap me. My head's already fucked up enough. We'll update when I figure out what the fuck I'm gonna do. Right now I need a drink. Or 10.